bongocero que se va, bongocero que se va. Cumba, 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 cumbachero, bongo, 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 bongocero. Riquiti que va sonando el cumbachero, bongocero que se va, bongocero que se va. Y suena así el tambor, riquiti, ay, tucutumba. Y vuelve a repicar, riquiti. Cumba, 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 cumbachero, bongo, 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 bongocero. Riquiti que va sonando el cumbachero, bongocero.
4.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session of Latino Perspectives. My name is Reynaldo Cervantes, and I'm the producer and the co-host of this program. Tonight, we have a wonderful program set up for you. We have a wonderful guest. He's a world-famous instructor out at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. His name is Professor Doug Patterson, and they've got a great event coming up shortly. And we're going to be discussing that event. It has something to do with pedagogy, and I know very little about pedagogy other than what I learned, you know, on myself. But it's going to be a good instruction. I know you're real excited about it, Doug. And why don't we start by just giving yourself a little bio? Let the people know exactly who you are, and you know, and why you're such a great man.
Thanks, Ronaldo. I really do appreciate you bringing me on your show. Given the leadership and stature that you bring to the community, it's a real honor to be here.
Well, thank you.
And my bio is, as anyone else, it's kind of complex and kind of long. But I was born in Omaha right after the Second World War. My dad was stationed here at Fort Omaha and the Federal Building, and so I was born here in '45. And then we left for their hometown in South Dakota once the war was over. And I grew up in South Dakota. I didn't really get back to Omaha until I was hired here in 1981. In that time I went to college, I went to graduate school, I went to the West Coast to teach. And I had a position here at UNO, and it's been a real wonderful opening for me, is to work in this region. You know, the place I was born, I didn't get back to for 30-some years. So now I teach at UNO. I've been there for about 34 years now. I teach theater. I did teach acting and directing extensively, and the last 10 years have shifted also into theater history, literature theory, some graduate studies, and I direct plays. And I'll be directing a play next fall again called Hedda Gabler.
Very good.
Is that okay?
Yeah, there you go. I'll tell you, Doug, I know I've approached you and you've kind of agreed to do. We're going to try to start a theater group here in South Omaha.
I'd love to do that.
It's called Triato, and it's going to be based on little skits about my personal story. Cool. Not that I'm anything great, but I don't know anybody else's story. Talk about some of the experiences that I had growing up in western Nebraska.
And we might get some other stories.
Oh, yeah.
People might be stimulated.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You bet.
Yeah, it's fresh territory.
Absolutely.
Doug, now you have this real significant event coming up here shortly. It has to do with pedagogy and stuff. Mm-hmm. Could you kind of just give us some real in-depth, little background as to how, I know it's a national type of an event.
Yeah. Even international.
Right, international, and you'll have people from all over the world.
All over the world.
Attending here, and so give us some little skinny on that.
Well, what it is a conference that we managed to start here 20 years ago. So this conference that happens in June, end of June, the 26th through the 29th. We began it here in 1995. I'd made connections with a person named Augusto Boal, and Boal had developed a technique called the theater of the oppressed, and he had paralleled this with a similar work from Brazil called the pedagogy of the oppressed. And so there we get to that word pedagogy, and I'll see if I can clarify that. Okay. The sort of the thumbnail sketch of this is that personally, Paulo Freire, back in the 50s after the war, was unimpressed with the way in which his teaching was not connecting to people. He said it's just running off of people. He sort of used a lecture system, whatever. Said it wasn't working. So he sort of had a personal discussion with himself, and he said, what is it that we need to teach? What do people in my classes need to learn? The people in my class are on the margins of society. descendants of black slave, Portuguese slaves. They don't have money, they don't have a lot of privilege. He said, well, really what we need to do is we need to learn dialogue. Because basically he said the human being is dialogue. We communicate ourselves to each other through words, gestures, and sounds. And it's in that dialogue that we can build the world together, if we assume that dialogue is on equal ground. Then his assumption about that was not only were we built out of dialogue, but we're built by our parents and our family and our extended family, our community and our school. And the richness of those first few years of learning to be a human being in a certain culture with a certain language is extraordinarily wonderful for most kids. But at some point we find out that we can't put our hand on the hot plate, or we can't empty the trash basket in the middle of the living room. So we get a no, you can't do that. And we don't like that. It's what we call the terrible twos. Because 2 years of really wonderful dialogue, baby come here and Google Gaga, baby's all we've had, and now all of a sudden there are parameters. They're very important. And we don't like that. And we tend not to like it for the rest of our lives, because in a few more years we begin to find out that these are not just those one moments with mom when she says don't touch the hot plate. It tends to be from culture, from society. And Freire called that the monologue. And the monologue of race, the monologue of class, the monologue of language and culture, sexual orientation, national origin, and that these monologues, when put in place by legal systems and paralegal systems, not only oppress people, but it kills people. It wears out their life, it wears out their hopes, wears out the possibility. And Freire said, so the last thing I should do as a teacher is come into a class and lecture to students who are on the edge, because they get lectures all the time. They get the social lecture. They have to listen, they have to take it all the time. He said, that's not the way to teach people who are dealing with real oppression. And we've all had some oppression. We've all had it in some form. But some forms of oppression are truly systemic. They're part of the structure. So Freire said, in my classes from now on, we're going to engage in dialogue. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to admit that all students, whether they're adult students or young students, everybody knows something. Everybody knows things. So the first thing we're going to do is teach each other about each other. We're going to begin our dialogue of saying, this is what I know about me, and this is what I know about my neighborhood, this is what I know about school and what I think about it. So we begin right away in dialogue. In our current education system, as you know, you come into class and you don't know anything about philosophy. You don't know anything about history. So we just take the top off your head and we pour in official information, and then we measure how much of that you retain and how much you can write about, and that's your grade. And I know that's simplistic, but it is the basic metaphor of accumulating official information. And Paulo Freire said, for the oppressed, the official information is part of the oppression.
Right.
So he said, in our classroom, we need to do something different. Not only will we dialogue with each other, but we'll ask questions of each other. And we'll also ask questions of the text. If we've got a text in front of us, here, we're going to ask questions about that. Rather than it being the sole source of all knowledge and authority, we're going to ask questions about that. We want to teach our students how to ask questions about the text, and how to also, and very importantly, ask questions about the teacher.
Wow.
To see what the teacher knows that can be useful. Because as it is, you know how classes go. It's the wise person, it's Doug Patterson in front of the room with all this international reputation, whatever. And he said, that's not useful for oppressed people. They don't need that. What they need to know is, they need to know what I know as a teacher, and what do I know that could be useful for them in combating and eliminating oppression. Because that's the real core mission of life if you're living without power. And we'll also learn information on that. We're going to learn information on the terms of the oppressed, so they can question it. Then what's really wonderful about Paulo's approach is, if people learn to do that analysis and questioning or whatever, they will leave my classroom and they will ask questions outside.
Absolutely.
Of power and authority that is oppressive and is illegitimate. So if this image is oppression, he said, we will always demand dialogue, and we want to know why and how can we change it. And he said, this is the education that we need to have. That is pedagogy.
Very good.
That's pedagogy. He would say that at the basic level, training is repetitive. So
Yeah.
like you do push-ups, or you learn spelling, you do aerobics, that's training. You just do it all the same things, repetitive. Next level is education, where you get what the culture thinks you need in terms of texts and history and background and language and whatever. And then the next stage is critical thinking.
Very good.
Think about that and ask questions, and that's where you get to pedagogy.
Yeah, and that's that critical thinking component. Well, let me just say, I was an instructor. Up in Chicago
Yeah.
for 13 years,
Right.
and then 2 years in curriculum. But I taught 8 hours a day, and all year long to professionals. And of course, our process was introductions of each other, and then lecture. And then these were hour increments, and you take 10 minutes out. But in my classes, and believe it or not,
I'm not.
I inverted it.
Of course.
I inverted it. I only had 10 minutes of instruction, and the rest they were to do group exercises.
Of course.
And that really, because these were adults, and they were professional, and they really, in my opinion, I didn't understand the pedagogy concept or the critical thinking. One, which is these individuals got more out of the dialogue that they had because they brought it from all over the world.
Yes.
Because there was a World Training Center, and they learned more from each other than they would ever have from my lecture.
That's true.
Sorry
It's
to
really
say.
true. And so you can use texts and use books and all that kind of stuff, whatever you want to use. But it matters to share with each other what you got out of it, ask questions about it, disagree, and in that way bring about dialogue as a way of life. Because one of the worst things is to live in terms of monologue, and there's nothing more monologue than a drive-by shooting. That's a monologue.
That's right.
So if oppressed communities are, which can be many,
Yeah.
are dealing with these monologues, people are picking up the monologue as the way to deal with life, because that's the only way to get power. And Freire said, no, this is much powerful. If we are with each other, working with each other in dialogue, we can transform the world.
Now, I categorize, it seems, a lot of what you're talking about into my definition of institutional racism.
Right, there you go for it.
And what happens is that this thing gets institutionalized in rules and regulations and the way to teach and what you teach and the way you measure that
Right.
teaching with
That's right.
outcomes.
That's right.
And it seems to me what you're doing here is putting a whole different scheme together with respect to approach to teaching.
Yes.
I mean, this is not develop an outline and curriculum. I mean, this could be part of an outline, but you're actually encouraging discussion.
Discussion, critical thinking,
And
pedagogy.
but
yes.
it's let's get into this critical thinking
Okay, sure.
concept. It's a heavy concept, but people don't really understand what it means. Well, not just people, me too.
I understand.
What it is to talk about critical thinking.
You pull it apart. You have an issue. Like, let's say you have an issue here in Omaha with I know there's sometimes issues in South Omaha with police and police relationships to the community. Well, rather than just sort of, getting a few kind of limited points of view on it, get people together to talk about it, so to pull it apart. What do we know together about this? How can we tease this apart and share that information? This is critical thinking. To be critical in the sense of not criticizing, but to pull apart and to learn more and to understand not only what I understand, what the text understands, but what do other people understand. For Freire, that's very important. We do it together. One of the things he was very fond of saying is, you know 10 things I don't know, and
Yeah.
I know 10 things you don't know.
Right.
Let's talk. You know?
Right, right.
And in fact, it is that dialogue that is the joy and the payoff of life.
Right. No, that's awesome.
Yeah. So he would say, look, if the Harvards and the Yale of this world want to do lectures and pour in all the official information, so all the lawyers and all the business people learn how it is, he said that's what they need to do. Oppressed people don't need to learn how it is.
That's right.
Remember back when Walter Cronkite would say, and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
But that's not what we want. We want
So-
to say, how can it be?
So this will impact learning to the extent that it's going to help oppressed individuals
Individuals and communities.
and communities
You bet.
because Now, that has to be institutionalized, or the process has to be one that's championed
Yeah.
by an institution, or, for example, if you're gonna try to do this in a high school, then I don't know where pedagogy and lesson plans countervene, and whether or not, if you're gonna be teaching a class of 30 or 300, if there's how you would adapt this concept with that physical classroom.
Yeah, you've raised a terrific question. Not just the classroom, but the teachers. Most of us have gotten a lot of this, in our education. So we have teachers who have themselves been, especially with this last 10 years of No Child Left Behind. The students say, "What's the answer? I want to know, what do you want on this? I want to put down the right answer in the test." And in a fairy class would be, well, let's find out what's the right answer for us.
There it is.
Let's find out and a lot of teachers don't have that exposure, and I feel totally sympathetic. I'm not saying, oh, everybody's going to become a sort of a liberation Apollo fairy teacher overnight. No, we all have to learn. I was brought up in the standard system, and I've had to change a lot. So it's not just like you snap your fingers and it's all different. There is a sense, I think, of acknowledging that a dialogical education needs to be a real part of the curriculum, maybe not all of it, but a real part of it, and that it has a political and social value that eventually translates into economic value. And that if an institution of a school says, yeah, this is important, this is something that we as a community want to see our young people and our lifelong learners and adults to engage in, then the institution says, okay, we will begin to find people who teach like this, who know about this, who come to the Pedagogy and the Theater Press Conference over at UNO at the end of June. We'll have a lot of teachers there, we'll have a lot of people do community work who advocate to Paulo Freire's approaches and Augusto Boal's approaches to theater, which is also not a monological theater, but a dialogical theater. So we put these conferences together and other people do things. We have programs now in the United States that are teaching Paulo Freire and Augusto Boal approaches to education and culture, and we are turning out, that's a terrible manufactured term, we are educating and developing a cadre of teachers who know about this and understand the value.
Well, just speaking from a teaching perspective,
Yeah, sure.
When I was teaching, I had to teach lawyers, I had to teach engineers, and I'm nothing. So, you cannot be expected to know everything as an instructor, see? And to me, it's admitting to yourself, because once you put yourself in a position where you make an error, an engineering error, let's say, and it's every engineer would know you don't know what you're talking about.
Credibility.
There goes your credibility.
Exactly.
And that is the essence. So if you change, what I think you're doing is changing the method, the pedagogy, a style of teaching where it's inclusive, because you have 10 things that I don't know, and I have 10 things that you don't know, and giving credit for our life's experiences is a powerful. I see that as a very powerful tool.
Oh, yeah.
I see this concept. Now we're 2 minutes away from our first break.
Okay, cool.
And then we'll come back with our second. But what I want to do is concentrate on the actual program that's going to happen here. I know there's a certain date. We'll give that date during the next. And there's a certain place, and there'll be certain people coming in, and there's costs and that involved, and there's also opportunity for local people to go to the conference.
We have support.
There you go.
We have support.
Okay, so Doug, let's go ahead and take a little short break here, and we'll let you all get an opportunity to go get some pens and pencils, because the next session is going to be heavy.
We'll try to lighten it up.
Yeah, we'll try to lighten it up a little bit. So thank you, and we'll be right back. Don't touch that clicker or whatever it is. Don't touch that fade.
back in the day, a bunch of old white guys got together and decided we should have public schools.
I think we should have public schools. I agree.
This was a wholly controversial idea and has made many people very angry for quite some time now. But it was eventually decided that everyone should get an education. Well, unless you are black, Asian, female, or from one of the tribes still living in the land that is now ours. Well, I guess they're okay as long as they act white. Eventually, these groups were added back in, but the question became, what is the best way to teach these kids? The old white guys had a conversation.
What is the best way to teach these kids? Well, we can all agree that kids are dumbasses. Yes, nothing going on in there. Well, if nothing's in there, what's the best way to get something in there? With hammers? No. We shove it in there, like putting items in a box. With hammers? Forget the hammers.
And so the modern teacher, holder of all worldly knowledge, was born. This put the teacher in a very interesting place. The teacher is at the center, doesn't learn, knows everything, thinks for the class, is the only one to talk, disciplines, chooses subjects, has authority over all, is the speaker, and is all-powerful. But while the teacher was elevated by these things, she was also required to balance all of them out, a task akin to holding a load of bricks above your head while 30 children screamed at you all day.
Well, I'd say this is working out swimmingly. I agree. We have a nice, subservient workforce.
Freri, and that's Freri like fairy with an R, enters the scene. Freri came up with the wholly remarkable idea that students were, in fact, human beings, and not objects, within which we deposit knowledge. He'd called his novel idea problem-posing education. The teacher is no longer the one who teaches, and the student of the teacher cease to exist, and a new term emerges. Teacher-students with student-teachers. The revolutionary idea was that everyone had a unique point of view on life, and that no one person had a better point of view than anyone else. If everyone worked together, they could all use their unique points of view to build upon their knowledge, rather than just learning the point of view of one person. Apparently, it made things better.
Impossible, I know. Impossible. People are dumbasses and can only learn if knowledge is shoved into them. By us. Exactly. I don't even know how this Freri guy got this knowledge anyway. I didn't teach him. Me neither. You didn't? No. My hammer broke ages ago. Well, then who did?
Freri told a story.
Now I see that without man, there is no world.
Let's say, for the sake of argument, that all men on earth were to die, but that the earth itself remained, together with the trees, birds, animals, rivers, seas, the stars. Wouldn't all this be a world?
Oh no, there would be no one to say, this is a world.
The concept, illustrated by the uneducated man, was previously said by a rather smart dude named Sartre. La conscience et le monde sont dans du même cul. For some inexplicable reason, it would appear that Freri had stumbled upon the concept that dumb people had just as much to say as smart people. In fact, it appeared that smart people who, as it turned out, weren't exactly all that smart, were totally trying to control the dumb people, and that was really cramping the dumb people's style. You see...
Hold on.
Yes?
We're not trying to control everybody. Of course not. We just want everyone to blindly accept authority and do everything we say.
Not helping.
What? They're not going to realize. They think they're smart.
Why would they think that?
Because we told them that they are. Oh, yeah. Anyways, we are definitely not trying to make people think that they are not being oppressed while keeping them in the same situation they've always been in.
Agreed. May I continue?
Yes.
Frere proposed pulling the rug out from under the oppressors and creating a new order. In this new world, the person who could present their argument the best would be listened to. Those who could not would listen and strive to present arguments that were better. This may sound familiar because the scientific community has, astonishingly, been successfully doing this for decades. This has also caused quite the controversy and is still making many people very angry, namely those who believe that money equals brains. But we all know that money doesn't equal brains because no matter how much sriracha you put on a stack of hundreds, zombies will never eat it. Frere's problem-posing education did have a few problems. For example, if students, especially the younger ones, see themselves as wholly equal with their teachers, a few problems are bound to arise.
For the record, I don't see anything wrong with that. A revolution is good, and hierarchy is bad.
Quiet you. The solution is to find a happy medium. If you go too far in one direction, or the other direction, there are going to be issues. And because we've just told you all of this, you should believe all of it and never think about it at all, because everything you see on TV is true.